Elind Sulmina is a friend I met in Geneva. He studied interpreting and translation in Italy with a minor in diplomacy. Now, to get to the United Nations is not an easy task. Also, it is a very large organization with many different agencies, so I find it is interesting to hear Elind's personal path that took him to Geneva and to the UN. Right. Thank you, Elind, for accepting my invitation, even if you and I are sick.
That's true.
But we love podcasting so much that we're going to be doing this today.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
It's a pleasure. And I haven't interviewed a UN officer yet, so I'm very glad to have you on my podcast. And I would love to know how you got to the UN. And tell me a little bit about your background and your path.
Well, I had for sure a bumpy ride to be here today at the UN, but it's a nice story to tell to people and also to your listeners in this beautiful podcast. I studied diplomacy and interpreting and translation at the University of Trieste, but my professor of English interpretation, which is different from a translation, straight from the first day told me that I was not going to be a good interpreter because I already had in mind my own vision, my own way of seeing the world, and that my future would not be an interpreter. And so he's actually the one that actually drove me to think about instead of becoming an interpreter to become a diplomat. And so I did my studies in both interpreting and translation to acquire the language skills, but at the same time I compensated those with diplomatic courses in Trieste in Italy, and then my path brought me to Geneva in Switzerland, and here I am at the UN today.
Awesome. Yes, it's. I've known you for a while, so I've known your path, and it's not been always easy and straightforward for sure. So you, since you studied interpreting, what was the next path? The next step towards the UN. Did you apply to the UN? Did you work for the organizations before?
Well, I did my bachelor in interpreting and translation as major and minoring in diplomacy. And
Mm-hmm.
I used to go both in Trieste as well as in the small town of Gorica, which is at the border with Slovenia. It's not a very well-known town, but it's, I think, one of the most important town and city in Italy for diplomacy. The Italian diplomats usually come from there. And after graduating from the University of Trieste, I had the choice either to go to Brussels, either to go to Paris, or either to go to Geneva. I had applied to the different universities. Of course, had I chosen Paris or Brussels, I think I would have focused my career at the European level. So maybe today I won't be at the UN, but I would be at the EU Commission or
Mm-hmm.
the European Union in general. But yeah, I actually chose to go to Geneva because a friend of mine was actually going to apply at the University of Geneva and he invited me, hey, why don't you apply at the University of Geneva as well so we can rent and share the apartment, the two of us. And the funny story, well, it's a sad story, is that my friend didn't he wasn't accepted, but I was accepted. So
Hmm.
I remember that I applied, just out of the blue. I even remember my application. It was something about, dear admission committee, I'm really thrilled about the prospect of studying in Paris. And I actually sent this application in Geneva because that was, the level of attention that I had given to Geneva and
A
to
copy and
Switzerland.
paste.
Exactly. My focus was, I want to work for the European Union, and then, all of a sudden, the following day, I was accepted in Geneva. And when I received that answer, I was, okay, I do not even know where Geneva is. I have never thought about going to Switzerland. For me, Switzerland was always, something outside the EU. It didn't
Hmm.
make sense to me that Geneva, like Switzerland, was, at the center of the European Union, but it was still not part of the EU. So it was very strange, but I think, it definitely had an impact with my life.
Yeah, for sure. Huh? Both your friend and life have made the choice for you, and then you're
Exactly.
tagged along. And what did you study in Geneva?
In Geneva, I actually studied something more technical and something that was actually going to relate me with the UN work. I studied ISO standards and the sustainable development. I did my master at the University of Geneva,
Mm.
and the ISO is the International Organization for Standards. It's not a UN agency, but it's something that you would compare to a UN agency, and it's located in Geneva. So it's
Okay,
something that would bring you to an international career.
I see. Okay, so you finish your studies, you've learned a lot, and what happened next?
Well, I didn't know what to do. I was, during my second year, I also had the chance to stay in Canada for 6 months. I went to Toronto and I attended the university there. I really liked the experience there, and I had some thoughts. Maybe I actually relocate. Why shouldn't I do that? Why shouldn't I relocate to Toronto? People were great, very friendly. The job market was very dynamic. There were plenty of opportunities for me,
Hmm.
but there was something about being back to Geneva, about being back to Switzerland, and I actually decided to come back and try my luck in Switzerland.
Okay, did you find it?
It was difficult, but actually yes, I think the UN ecosystem in Geneva is very dynamic. So if you are a smart student, you are ambitious, you should also have some luck, of course, but you should try your luck. You should apply, attend events. There are plenty of UN events in Geneva because there are many UN agencies, and you should also follow what you are passionate about. So at that moment in time, I decided to write my master thesis on a subject of interest for the International Telecommunication Union, which is the UN agency that manages everything about ICT, information communication technology,
Hmm.
internet, cybersecurity at the world level. It's the technical agency of the UN that does that. And so I wrote my master thesis on that subject. I had the chance to interview many people that at the moment I have the chance to call them colleagues. And I just showed that I was determined, that I had a lot of ambition, that I worked hard,
Yeah.
and I sent emails, applied for different positions, and I had the chance to be interviewed for one position, and I got accepted.
Great. Awesome. So, because I've known you, so I know that there has been a chapter in your life where you have been involved with a different project and you were working at a certain point for the Solar Impulse Foundation. Would you like to tell me about this? Because I think it's important for the listener, someone who aspires to work for United Nations or the NGOs and non-governmental organizations world, and that they know the all the the avenues that can present to yourself, or the ones that you have been opening up, hoping to get to a different path, and then what happened in between. So please tell me about Solar Impulse.
Today I can call myself a UN officer, but actually I had a brief chapter in Lausanne, and this is also the place where we actually got to really meet the two of us. And I had the chance to work for the Solar Impulse Foundation as an intern during my academic years at the University of Geneva. So it's a very nice memory that I have because the chairman of the Solar Impulse Foundation is Bertrand Piccard, which is a very well-renowned explorer that has flown around the world with a solar-powered airplane without one drop of fuel. He only flew thanks to solar power, solar energy. And of course, Bertrand Piccard is for me a person that I admire and see as someone to follow that can really push the boundaries. And my internship at the Solar Impulse Foundation lasted for 8 months. It is actually at the Solar Impulse Foundation that I really started to learn how to work with governments, with diplomats, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Solar Impulse Foundation is a very a small NGO, but still has a meaningful impact in the field of sustainable development. I just want to mention that Bertrand Piccard participates at every conference of Paris COP, and the work that the Solar Impulse Foundation has done is seen by many as a leading example of what the governments and the countries could do to really accelerate, the advent of sustainable energy, not only for transports but also in other fields. So it's a nice memory that I bring, of course, that I always bring with me whenever I go.
And so what was the step between Solar Impulse and the UN?
Well, with Solar Impulse, I saw that there was, my path there was coming to the end. I didn't see the opportunity to continue, and for this reason, I came back to my main focus, which was working for the very big international organizations. It is true that it was, let's say, a sad moment because I had great aspirations at Solar Impulse. But I think, knowing the future today, connecting the dots now, I think it was the best decision. Really being today a UN officer, I can see that I have, much more impact with my decision making compared to when I was working at Solar Impulse. So the transition was a little bit bumpy, moving from one job to another, especially because I'm also very young, but it was worthy. And I was talking with one colleague from the French government a few weeks ago in Lithuania, in Vilnius, and people look at me and I am very young, and so they are a little bit surprised that I'm actually a UN officer. And so they usually ask me the question, what's your background? How many years of experience do you actually have? Have you worked for your government before? Because usually the way is that you work at the national level, and then the cherry on top of the cake of your business career is to actually enter the UN. Whereas from my side, I entered the UN as, let's say my first full professional experience.
Mm.
And so it's always funny to say, no, no, I'm a UN officer, and this is my first, full-time job position. But it's funny because people really always ask me this same question every day.
How do you apply to the UN? I know that there's some very strict processes and procedures. Is it always the same for everyone? What did you do between having your thesis, your work with the interviews, and then the job?
Yeah, no, it's very competitive. I'm honest, and I'm very happy today to call those people that I interviewed as colleagues. I do not want to say that it didn't have any impact, but in any case, I had to really go through a very competitive process. The UN is a very transparent international organization. The mechanism on how the job positions are opened and are displayed on the website is again very transparent. It's easy. You can simply type UN careers. You can decide where you want to work. So you have different headquarters. You have Europe with Vienna, Austria, and Geneva. You also have Africa, Asia. You have, of course, the UN headquarters in New York, in the US. And you should simply apply. You have the mechanism of application is very similar also to the private sector. So you have to have a good CV. You have to have good credentials, so recommendation letters. You have to show that you are applying for a job position and you know about the organization, you know about the position that you may be assigned to. So you should not just apply and try your luck. You should really make sure that when you write your cover letter, the HR understands that you really aim for that position. And then after that, if you pass the first HR selection, you would be interviewed by colleagues, by UN personnel. You have both written and oral examinations,
Hmm.
and then you have a shortening. So you have first a very big group of potential candidates, and then with the different rounds, it gets smaller and smaller until if you have showed your skills, you may be the one that wins, the process.
And how long did it last?
Well, it lasted. I think 1 month and a half. It was actually very fast.
Very fast. Yeah.
From
Yeah.
my side, it was very fast because at that moment in time, the position that that I was assigned to was a vacancy that needed to be filled in,
Okay.
and I really matched the profile.
Ah,
So,
excellent. So
yeah,
you were there at the right time.
I was
Mm.
there at the right time, but as I say to to friends and families and also colleagues, you can be there at the right moment, right time, but if you are not good enough, you cannot last for long.
For long. Yeah.
Because and especially the UN, you don't really get permanent contracts immediately. You usually get fixed term contracts,
Yeah.
and you have to renew that by showing that you deliver on the expectations.
Are you on a fixed contract or permanent now?
So this is my last round of fixed term contract, and it should last until 2023. Yes.
Okay, well, best of luck
Thank you.
for the yeah, for it to become permanent. No, it's a great achievement to be part of the UN. I have applied many years ago and I didn't get in. So I say why? So it can be very frustrating. And then I've known people who have got in like first try.
Mhm.
They didn't even know very much whether they wanted to be part of it. And then once they're in, they say, "Oh, this is great to work for the UN,"
Mhm.
and so forth. Now, in terms of your tasks and what is expected of you, you're saying you're a UN officer. Are there some general an overview of tasks that you could say, okay, this defines a UN officer, whether it's ITU, so the telecommunication union, like you are in, or the UNHCR for the refugees and so forth, because there's UN officers a bit in all of the organizations of the UN, right?
No, that's correct. I mean, technically, if you want to expand my full title, but you usually don't do that, I would be a UN ICT infrastructure officer,
Okay.
meaning that I really manage the ICT infrastructure and the technical assistance that I deliver at the European level. I specifically work for the regional office for Europe because, of course, you cannot cover the entire world, but you have to be sharp with the support that you deliver. The ITU, I do not know, maybe you'll tell me, it's composed of 800 employees. My regional office is composed of 15 people, and I specifically support the countries by delivering technical assistance in the field of ICT infrastructure, meaning I support the governments to deploy high-speed connectivity, high-speed internet, that is 4G, 5G, at the country level. And I also support the countries to deploy spectrum management in the sense that among countries, I'm sorry, Laura, but I'm diving into the technicalities.
Yeah, please do.
The spectrum management is something very important because there are interferences, telecommunication interferences among bordering countries, and so the spectrum management is also key because you have cell towers and they are transmitting signals that sometimes goes beyond your border, and so this may cause trouble to one country or another. And again, this is something that I focus at the European level. For the Europe region, we have the two blocks. We have the Western blocks with a block with the Western countries that are very advanced. But then
Mm.
we also have the Eastern Europe, which is advancing rapidly, but may require some more technical assistance. And so what we really do is supporting both blocks in what they really need. So for Western Bloc, it's mostly about spectrum management. For Eastern Bloc, it's also spectrum management, but we also deliver technical assistance for internet, high-speed broadband development, so that the citizens of the country can benefit from free access to the internet with the public services, etc. What else could I also say? We also support the countries to advance the digitalization with the public administration.
Mm.
So translating, the old version of the public administration full of papers and bureaucratic steps to actually very few steps thanks to access to the computer, to the phone, and making sure that the public administration is actually meaningful for the citizen and that the services that the public administration offers is something that the citizens can benefit, but in an easy way. Sometimes just to receive to get some documents, it may become very complicated, and that is the case, for those countries where the public administration is not digitalized. And on top of that, you can think also on the other side that you have to develop the digital skills for the citizen. So you may have the ICT infrastructure, so you may have high access to the high-speed internet.
Hmm.
You may have the public administration being fully digitalized, but then if the citizens are not aware on how to use those tools, then it becomes a problem. So we tackle the
Mm.
ICT challenges from different fronts.
So do you also help, like for example, with public awareness campaigns for the local communities?
More than a public awareness campaign, which is something that I think it is up to the government to deliver. What we do is, again, technical assistance and trainings. So what we usually do is we train the government to deliver online on-site courses to the public administration, to the citizen on a specific topic. This is then scaled up by the government. From our side, we want always to support the government, to support the country, to have all the tools, and then let the country manage the challenges by themselves. Of course, we go hand in hand and we support the country through the entire process. But the delivering of the digital skills is something that the government does, as you mentioned, with public awareness, but also with the trainings, with digital online courses, etc.
Okay. What do you enjoy most about your job today?
Well, I think the fact of working with the government, with many different governments, gives me the chance to have a really an international overview. I do not get stuck with the national view of a narrow-minded vision of just being in one country, but I see the different perspectives and the different needs that countries have. And I think this is very useful to really have a global understanding of the world. We are 193 member states,
Hmm.
and we have different opinions, different challenges, different needs. And working in such an international environment gives you the ability to see different things, to see one object from different perspectives. And I think this is an amazing opportunity.
And what is one thing you do not enjoy?
Well, okay,
To
let
be,
me let
if you
me.
can stay politically
Of
correct
course,
towards the
yes.
UN.
No, of course. Maybe just to kindly mention that everything that I say just represents my personal views and not officially the one
Right.
of my
Sure.
organization. One thing that I don't really like, maybe sometimes it's difficult to reach consensus because we have to understand the different realities of our counterparties, and so this process is slow.
Hmm.
Sometimes we are very ambitious and we are eager to tackle and find a solution for a given problem, and so we are really eager to move fast. As you know, there's an African proverb that says if you want to go fast, you should go alone, but if you want to go further, you should go together. And
Hmm.
so, this is something that you have to accept. Like the world is complex, and maybe in a private company, decisions are taken very rapidly. But in such environment, it may take some time, but this is just the reality of, the mechanism in place, and it should
Yeah.
be like that, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And what's next for you in the future?
I cannot say I have, as you know me by now, I have a lot of ambition.
A lot of
I want
projects.
to, I would like to continue to work for the UN, but at the same time, the world is your oyster, and you never know if you may find other opportunities. that can attract your interest. I personally would like to continue for some years in at the UN,
Hmm.
but I'm also attracted to to deliver my expertise maybe in the private sector,
Okay.
and that usually it would be also complementary for my business career. I think that having a full a career at the UN may be fascinating, but sometimes I also think that the private sector is sometimes more challenging, gives you more pressure. Not
Mm.
that we don't have at the UN at the moment pressure. I think we have a lot of pressure to deal with, but the private sector is also intriguing. So you never know.
Mm. The doors are
Uh,
open, anyways, and you're very talented. So I'm sure there will be 10 more ideas and projects that you'll be involving yourself with.
let's see. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, pleasure. And thank you for being part of my podcast. It has made it even more precious.
I look forward to the next time and next opportunity. Maybe to update you on
Yeah.
what have happened.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I look forward to that. Thank you very much, Laura, for having me.
Pleasure. Like Elind said at the beginning, career can be a bumpy road, no matter what career. And by career, I mean any job. And this is why I do Job Tales, to show you, the young generation, that there are many ways to find your profession. The road might be bumpy, or it might be super smooth. You can lose faith, and maybe in time you realize you wished you had taken different roads, maybe a side road, or different studies altogether. All that, the good and the so-called bad, make our life. I hope that my podcast helps you a tiny bit in the search for what's good for you. Bye for now.